He promised me the ocean and handed her the wheel. That's how I knew my marriage had already sunk before we ever boarded. The cruise was her idea. Just a short break before our honeymoon, Mary had said, her voice light, eyes already somewhere distant. George tagged along because he needed cheering up, she claimed. I was told to understand, to trust, to wait my turn. The three of us at the dock, sun glinting off the water, and me, holding her luggage like a driver instead of a husband. She didn't even look back when she stepped aboard with him. The cruise lasted 7 days. I called on the first. She didn't pick up. I texted on the second. No reply. By the third day, the only thing I received was a photo from an old classmate, Mary on the upper deck, in a floral dress, sipping something pink, George beside her with his hand a little too close to hers. The caption? Didn't know your wife and George were a thing now, congrats? I stared at that photo for 10 minutes straight, then I zoomed in on her face. She looked radiant, carefree, lighter than I'd seen her in months. She wasn't posing, she wasn't hiding. I think that's what gutted me the most. She looked like someone finally free of pretending. I had met Mary 6 years ago in a library. She dropped a book. I picked it up. That night, we talked until the sun bled through the windows. She was opinionated, fire-tongued, but there was something about the way she softened when she talked about dreams, Paris, ocean breezes, candlelight conversations. She said she wanted to find someone who didn't just hear her, but remembered her. I thought I could be that someone. I tried. I paid for her courses when she quit her job to study art. I borrowed money to help her open that gallery she loved. I stood beside her when her mother died and she broke into pieces I didn't know how to hold, and I never complained when George came back. He into our lives, her childhood friend, the boy next door who became a man with nowhere to land. He stayed on our couch for a month, then 2, then 3, he cooked, he smiled too much, he joked too easily, and Mary, she began to laugh in ways I hadn't heard in years. When I mentioned it, she said, "You're being insecure." When I asked why she gave him a key, she replied, "He's practically family." When I finally asked if I was enough, she whispered, "Why would you ask something like that?" She returned from the cruise glowing, hair beach-waved, skin sun-kissed, heart far away. I had cooked her favorite meal. She stared at it like it was foreign. "I'm tired," she mumbled, and went to bed alone. That night I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, waiting for her to call me in. She didn't. The next morning, I found a sand dollar necklace on the bathroom counter. Not mine, not hers, just carelessly left. I understood then. The cruise wasn't a pause, it was a replacement, and I had been waiting for something that was never coming back. David always believed that love was something you earned by showing up every day, quietly, without asking for applause. He wasn't loud, or flashy, or the kind of man who swept people off their feet in grand gestures. He was steady, he was constant. He was the type of person who remembered your coffee order even when you changed it twice. The kind who fixed your broken cabinet door without mentioning it. Who kept receipts just in case you ever needed to return something. And that was exactly how he loved Mary. They met in college, well, outside of it. David had been walking past the art building, earbuds in, eyes glued to a thick economics textbook, when he accidentally bumped into her. She was sitting on the stairs, sketchbook in her lap, headphones on, head bobbing to something jazzy and old. Her pencil flew, landed at his feet. He bent to pick it up. Their hands didn't touch. That's how careful he was, even back then. She looked up and smiled, brushing a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Thanks," she said. Her voice was soft, curious, not flirty, not detached, just human. That's what pulled him in. 1 week later, they were getting coffee at a student cafe. She talked about oil paints and Van Gogh and how she wanted to paint on massive canvases that took up entire walls. He listened. Not because he understood, but because it made her eyes glow when she spoke. And that glow, it felt rare. Precious. Their relationship didn't explode into being, it folded itself quietly into the background of David's life, like a slow watercolor bleed. She left sketches on his desk. He brought her snacks during her all-nighters. They fell into rhythm, like the soft click of puzzle pieces meant to fit. 3 years in, she got accepted into a postgraduate art residency across the country. David had just landed a solid entry-level job at a finance firm. He told her he'd help pay for her rent while she was away. She cried and said no, and he insisted until she relented. For the next 2 years, they did long distance. And when she returned, they moved in together. It wasn't perfect, but David never expected perfect. He just wanted honest, he just wanted presence. But things started shifting. At first, it was little things. She stopped painting, she said she felt uninspired. She started following influencers online, saying things like, maybe I should try curating instead of creating. David nodded, said he supported her either way. She smiled, kissed his forehead, but somehow, her glow was dimmer. Then George re-entered the picture. He was a childhood friend of Mary's, back in town after a breakup and looking for a place to crash. David said yes before Mary even asked. He thought, what's a couch for, if not to help people we care about? What he didn't realize was that some people, when given a couch, start reaching for the bed. George was charming. He told stories that made people laugh. He cooked elaborate meals. He complimented Mary's old paintings when even she had forgotten them, and slowly, David saw that glow return. Only now, it didn't come from him. That realization didn't arrive with a bang, it came slowly, like tide against stone. One day he saw Mary smiling at her phone, and when he asked what was funny, she said, nothing. She used to share everything. David told himself it was just nostalgia, that she and George had history, and sometimes history lingers, but history doesn't sneak into the kitchen at midnight, it doesn't leave behind a cologne scent on your couch, it doesn't borrow your wife's attention and never return it. Mary's affection began to feel borrowed, like she was renting space in their home until something better opened up. Still, David held on. He kept showing up. He planned little dates. He cooked her favorite meals. He left notes in her coat pockets. I love you, one read. He found it 3 weeks later, still folded, stuffed in the laundry. He didn't mention it. The cruise came shortly after that. Mary claimed it was a spontaneous idea, her and George, just needing a break from the city. It's nothing serious, she said. We just need to reset. When I come back, we'll talk. Talk? He hadn't even known they weren't talking. David didn't sleep that week. He went to work, came home, and sat on the edge of the bed they once shared, staring at the clock. He told himself not to imagine the worst, but the mind, once trained on suspicion, becomes a projector, casting painful reels in every silent hour. He didn't tell anyone what was happening, not even Thelma, his cousin who had always seen right through Mary. You deserve better, she once told him after a family dinner where Mary barely said a word. He had laughed it off then, said, she's just tired. But deep down, he knew it wasn't tiredness, it was disinterest. When the photo arrived from an old classmate, a snapshot of Mary and George on the upper deck, laughing like honeymooners, David didn't cry. He felt nothing at first, just a strange emptiness, as if his heart had stepped out quietly while no one was looking. When Mary returned, she didn't offer explanations. She came home tanned and glowing, tossed her sandals near the door like she had just run out to buy milk. David had prepared dinner, steamed rice, stir-fried shrimp, the meal they shared the night he proposed. She took one bite. I'm not hungry. That was when he knew. A $100 necklace showed up on the bathroom counter the next morning. Still had the tag attached, she hadn't even bothered to hide it. He didn't ask who it was for, he didn't need to. His name hadn't belonged to her for a while. David spent the rest of that day sorting through drawers, folding clothes, cleaning out digital photos from old hard drives, not out of anger, but preparation. Something in him had turned, not cold, not bitter, just awake. He remembered Thelma's words again. You deserve someone who runs toward you, not someone who keeps looking back. He didn't confront Mary, he didn't demand the truth, because the truth was already echoing in the silences between them, in the distance she kept, in the ring she no longer wore. He just packed a bag. And this time, he didn't leave a note. It started with a text message David wasn't supposed to see. He had picked up Mary's phone by accident, they had identical cases, and the screen lit up with a preview. I miss you already, last night felt like home. No name, just those words. He didn't need to guess, he didn't need to ask. There were only 2 people in the house last night, David and Mary, but clearly, one of them had been a ghost in the bed. He placed the phone back exactly where he found it, said nothing, and went to brush his teeth. The foam in his mouth tasted like metal. That day, he kissed her goodbye as usual. She didn't notice anything was off. He was getting good at pretending he didn't notice the late-night phone calls, the whispered arguments between her and George, the way she always defended him like her life depended on it. They were supposed to be planning their belated honeymoon. Mary kept postponing it. "Too much on my plate," she said. "Can we talk about this after the art fair?" The fair came and went, so did her excuses. The turning point came one Thursday evening. David came home early. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, lights off even though it was already dark outside. He stepped in, shoes silent on the wood floor, and turned the corner into the living room. There they were, Mary and George, sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch, not touching, not kissing. But the air between them crackled with familiarity that didn't belong to strangers, or friends. Mary stood up so quickly she almost knocked over the coffee table. "David, you're home early." George offered a lazy grin. "We were just talking." David said nothing, just nodded and walked past them to the bedroom. Closed the door, locked it, and leaned his head against the wood. It wasn't just the betrayal that burned, it was how familiar it all felt, like maybe, deep down, he had always known she was never fully his. That no matter how much love he poured into their life, her cup had been tilted toward someone else. He thought of Thelma again. She had always been blunt, brutally honest in ways he never had the courage to be. She once said, "David, you love with your eyes closed, that's noble, but dangerous." Maybe it was time to open them. The following morning, Mary acted normal. She asked what he wanted for breakfast. She kissed him on the cheek like nothing had happened. David played along, but he started watching everything differently. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes. Her laughter came too easily when George was around. And worst of all, she looked tired when she was alone with David, like being in their shared space was a weight. It wasn't just the text, or the couch moment, or the late-night whispering. It was the slow erasure of what they had built, the way she gave George things she used to give David, her attention, her softness, her secrets. David started staying late at work, not because he had to, but because the silence at home became louder than any phone ringing. One evening, when he came home around 10, he saw the light still on in the living room. George was there, barefoot, holding a wine glass, scrolling through a tablet that clearly belonged to Mary. She wasn't in sight. "She's in the shower," George offered casually. "Tiring day." David simply walked past him. But something about the way George said it, like he belonged here, curdled something inside him. In the bathroom, steam curled around the mirror. Mary's voice drifted through the door. She was humming. She hadn't hummed in months, not around David. Later that night, David asked her, carefully, almost like a stranger clearing their throat before speaking, "Do you ever think about us? The way things used to be?" Mary turned off the bedside lamp. "David, don't start this." "I'm not starting anything," he said. "I'm just asking." She sighed. "Things change, people evolve, that doesn't mean I don't care. But you don't love me anymore." There was a pause, then another, and then, softly, "That's not true." He looked at her silhouette in the dark. "But it's not the same either." She said nothing. And silence, David realized, is sometimes the most honest answer people ever give. The next day, Thelma called. She was in town for a weekend wedding and wanted to grab lunch. David almost said no, but something inside him, something cracked and weary, said yes. They met at a small Thai restaurant they used to love during college. Thelma ordered their usual. David didn't touch his food. "Talk to me," she said. David stared at the condensation on his water glass. "Have you ever loved someone so much that you didn't realize when they stopped loving you back?" Thelma didn't respond immediately. She let the question sit between them like a bruise. "You're not crazy," she finally said, "but you're doing what you always do. You're trying to hold a falling building with your bare hands." He nodded. "I think she's in love with someone else," he admitted. "George?" "Who else?" Thelma scoffed. "God, I never liked him. He's got that smug I want what you have look. I saw it the first day." David smiled weakly. "Wish I had seen it then. Are you going to confront her?" "I don't know, maybe, but part of me thinks she's waiting for me to do it, so she doesn't have to be the bad guy." "She already is, David." He nodded again, this time slower, as if absorbing the truth, layer by layer. That night, he came home early again. He didn't say anything, just walked in and sat across from Mary in the living room. She was scrolling her phone, legs tucked under her, wearing the oversized hoodie David bought her last winter. She looked up, surprised. "You're home." "I am." She tilted her head. "Is something wrong?" He stared at her. "Who sent the text?" Her lips parted slightly. "What text?" "The one that said, 'Last night felt like oh May.' I saw it. By accident. I didn't go through your phone." Her eyes narrowed. "That's private." "I didn't ask you to explain your privacy, I asked who sent it." She didn't answer, just stood up and walked toward the kitchen. "I don't want to fight." "We're not fighting, we're ending." She froze in the doorway. David stood too. "If you want to be with George, say it." She turned slowly, arms crossed. "It's not that simple." "It is. You made it simple." There was a crack in her voice. "I didn't plan for this." "No one does, but once you're in it, you choose who you walk toward. You chose him." She wiped at her eye. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, you replaced me, and you made me wait for it." Mary covered her face. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," David whispered. "Just stop pretending." He walked past her, out of the room, out of the house. He left the door open behind him. Let the wind decide whether to close it or not. That night, he slept at Thelma's place on the couch, barely blinking, the weight of her silence echoing louder than any confession ever could. David lay awake in Thelma's guest room, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly in rhythmic indifference. Every turn felt like a countdown, ticking away the final seconds of something that had once felt infinite. He hadn't brought a bag, just his phone, wallet, and keys. The clothes he wore still smelled like her perfume, and that made it worse. He didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, God, it did, but because he felt wrung out, like all the tears had already been used up while she was still smiling at someone else. Thelma didn't ask questions the next morning, she just left a folded blanket, a warm coffee, and a note. "Stay as long as you need." Her kindness was quiet, like his had once been. It made him ache. He walked through the city for hours, headphones in, but no music playing. Just silence, and the static hum of his own thoughts. Every couple holding hands felt like a mirror twisted in mockery. Every scent of her favorite bakery, or sight of a red car like the one she drove, triggered another fragment of memory he didn't want to revisit. The betrayal wasn't loud. That's what made it cruel. Mary hadn't yelled, she hadn't stormed out or thrown plates, she had just drifted. Quietly, seamlessly. As if slipping into someone else's arms was as normal as changing clothes after a long day. David kept replaying it, over and over, the missed calls, the sudden showering of affection toward George, the soft chuckles they shared when they thought he wasn't watching. Was there ever a real moment between them that wasn't already borrowed? And worst of all, he blamed himself. Not for what she did, but for how long he let it go on. For ignoring the signs, for silencing the voice in his head that said, "This isn't love anymore." Because love, he thought, wasn't supposed to feel like being slowly erased. He thought of their wedding day. How she trembled when he slipped the ring on her finger. How she looked at him and said, "I'm safe here." How many lies had begun in that one sentence? He wanted to scream, to break something, to rewrite the last 2 years. But instead, he kept walking because movement was the only thing that numbed the storm inside him. Every step away from her still felt like walking through fire. That night, he sat on Thelma's balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the streetlights flickering below. Thelma joined him quietly. She didn't press, just handed him a bowl of soup and sat beside him. After several minutes of silence, he finally spoke. "She doesn't even know I left." "She will," Thelma said. "She'll probably be relieved." "No, she won't." David turned to look at her. "How can you be sure?" Thelma met his eyes. "Because people like her, they don't want to lose you, they want to keep you just close enough to feed their conscience, but far enough not to feel responsible." Her words sliced through him. Not because they were harsh, because they were true. He remembered the time Mary forgot his birthday. 2 days later, she brought him a cake, said she was sorry, and kissed him like a favor. And he had smiled, hugged her, said it was okay. Every version of him, up until now, had been trained to forgive, but forgiveness without change becomes surrender. He sat in silence as Thelma returned inside. The soup went cold in his hands. Sleep didn't come easy. He dreamt of her voice, of the way she used to laugh in their kitchen barefoot, of the morning light catching in her hair as she read the news on her phone. But each dream turned darker, her back turning, George's smirk, his own hands reaching for someone who kept stepping farther away. He woke up gasping. The next day, he opened a notebook he hadn't touched in months. It was one Mary had gifted him on their second anniversary. Inside, he found a message written in her handwriting, "For your thoughts, even the ones you're too scared to speak." He stared at the page for a long time, then finally, he wrote, "You said you wanted honesty. I don't know if you ever meant it, because if I'm being honest now, truly honest, I think I've been disappearing since the day George moved in. It's not just about the cheating, it's about the silence, the disinterest, the way I had to shrink just to make room for him. I miss you, but I don't miss who you became." He closed the notebook, tucked it away again. Some truths didn't need to be sent, they just needed to be said, even if only on paper. Each day that passed, he spoke less and thought more. He'd never been a dramatic man, he didn't throw fits or make grand exits, but now, something inside him demanded clarity, closure. He needed to look her in the eye and ask the one question he hadn't allowed himself to ask. Why? Not because he needed her guilt, but because he needed to know when exactly she stopped loving him, when exactly she started seeing George as her safe place. He returned home 3 days later, quietly. The apartment was just as he had left it, neat, hollow. Mary was sitting at the dining table, scrolling her phone. She didn't hear him come in. "Did you even notice I was gone?" he asked. She looked up, startled, her lips parted, then shut. I wasn't sure if you needed space or if I was finally done pretending," he finished for her. She set her phone down. "I wasn't pretending. You were living 2 lives." Her shoulders sagged. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't just hurt me, Mary," David said, voice soft, breaking. "You emptied me, slowly, lovingly, like a leak I couldn't find." She blinked, eyes glossy. "I got lost. And you used me as a map while chasing someone else." She looked away. "I thought we could fix this." "We could have," he said, "if you had wanted to." He walked past her to the bedroom, packed a bag this time, folded his clothes, others methodically. His movements calm, hands steady, heart splintered but clear. Mary stood at the door. "David?" He didn't look up. "I didn't know how to stop." "That's the thing," he said, zipping the bag. "You never tried." As he moved toward the exit, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "I know." Then he let go. As the door clicked shut behind him, David felt the ache of grief and the weight of freedom collide. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the beginning of something honest, something real. It had been 2 weeks since David walked out for the second time, this time without hesitation, without the hollow hope that she would chase him. He had moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment above a bookstore on the east side. The landlord was quiet, the neighbors quieter, and for once, the silence didn't suffocate him, it steadied him. He was rebuilding slowly. Routines helped, work, cooking for one, reading again. He even began jotting notes in that old notebook Mary once gave him, not letters anymore, just fragments of thought, a line, a memory, sometimes a question, and then came the letter, folded neatly in a cream-colored envelope with no return address, slipped under his door one afternoon while he was out. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Mary. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it for nearly an hour before opening it. Inside was a single page, her handwriting, rushed, emotional. "David, I know you don't owe me anything, but you need to know the truth before someone else tells you and twists it. I'm pregnant." He read the words over and over, as if they'd change under the weight of disbelief. Pregnant. With George's child. With his? He clutched the paper tighter as the questions built in his chest like rising water. She hadn't called, hadn't tried to explain, just this letter, like a confession dropped from a high place, expecting him to catch it. He didn't sleep that night. His mind returned to that final week before he left, the moments when she lingered near him without saying much, the softness in her face as she stood in the doorway, watching him pack. The way she seemed as if she wanted to say something but didn't. Was she already pregnant then? Had she known? The next day, he went to Thelma's, letter in hand. She read it without blinking. Do you believe her? I don't know, he said quietly. Do you want to? He didn't answer that. Thelma leaned forward. David, if she's pregnant, you deserve to know. You deserve clarity, but don't let this letter suck you back into that house. I'm not going back, he said, but I need to know the truth. Thelma nodded. Then ask her, face to face. He waited 2 more days before calling. Mary answered after the 3rd ring. Her voice was softer than he remembered, almost cautious. David, I got your letter. Silence. Is it true? He asked. Yes. Another pause. Whose is it? He forced out. Her breath caught on the other end. I don't know. That single sentence tore something open inside him. Not rage, not even sorrow, just a deep, hollow echo of all the time he gave her and how little certainty he was left with in return. I need to see you, she said. He agreed, against Thelma's better judgment. They met in a quiet park across from the church where they had taken wedding photos. She sat on the same bench where they had once shared ice cream after signing their marriage papers. She looked thinner, paler. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. I didn't plan this, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't think you planned any of it, David replied. She nodded. I only found out a few days ago. I hadn't even told George yet. I wanted you to hear it first. Why? Because part of me still respects you, she said, eyes wet. And because if it's yours, I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. David said nothing. He watched the leaves stir on the pavement, the wind picking them up and scattering them like everything he thought was stable in his life. Have you decided? He asked. I'm keeping it, she said quietly. I've already made that choice. He nodded. Okay. Okay? You didn't ask for my opinion, just my reaction. Mary blinked, visibly thrown by his cold control. I didn't come here to manipulate you. No, he said, but you still expect me to catch the pieces you keep dropping. She wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her coat. You hate me. I don't, he said. I loved you too long to hate you, but I don't recognize you anymore. I don't know what you want from me. Mary swallowed. I don't either. And that was perhaps the most honest thing she'd said in months. The next day, George showed up at David's door. Unannounced. David opened the door and stared at him in silence. George looked shaken. She told me. Of course she did. I didn't know, George said. I swear, man, if it's yours. If it's mine, David said, stepping closer. You think this is about biology? You think that makes it better? George looked down. I just thought you should know I'm stepping back. Whatever this is, it started messy. Maybe it ends cleaner. David almost laughed. You're walking away from a child that might be yours? No, George said. I'll be there. I just meant, I'm not staying with her. David didn't know what stunned him more, the cowardice or the fact that Mary had already been abandoned by the very man she unraveled her marriage for. She's alone now? He asked. George hesitated. She said she wanted space, said she needed to figure things out without either of us around. David leaned against the doorframe. And now that the fun's over, you're just leaving her to clean up the ruin. I made mistakes, George said. No, David corrected. You made decisions. George nodded, as if accepting the weight. I'll take responsibility, just not her. David shut the door without another word. Later that night, he received a text from Mary. He left. He stared at it, then powered off the phone. The next morning, he sat with Thelma. Over coffee, told her everything. She stirred her cup slowly. So, now she's alone, and now she remembers what you were. She always knew what I was, David said. She just didn't value it until the flashier thing dimmed. And what are you going to do? He looked out the window. The street below was bustling, but it all felt far away. I'm going to wait, he said. For what? For the paternity test. And after that? I don't know. Thelma didn't press. She just reached over, squeezed his hand, and whispered, whatever you choose, don't choose it out of guilt. That night, David opened the notebook again. He wrote, You always said love was a safe place, but love isn't safety, it's sacrifice, it's knowing someone can break you and trusting them not to. I gave you that trust. And you handed it off like it meant nothing. Now I may be a father, or maybe I'm just the man who stood at the center of your storm while you figured out who you were. But no matter how this ends, I'm done being the place people come to when they have nowhere else to go. He closed the notebook, folded the letter, placed them both in a drawer, then, finally, he slept. The envelope arrived on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. David had been staring out the window of the bookstore apartment, watching raindrops stripe the glass like silver scars when the mail slot clattered open. He didn't move right away. Somehow, he knew what it was before he picked it up. Paternity test results. He turned it over in his hand, fingers trembling despite the layers of numbness he had built around himself. He sat down, the envelope resting in his lap like a verdict. It had been 3 weeks since the park meeting. Mary hadn't reached out again after the message. He left. David hadn't replied. He needed time to feel something other than the echo of her betrayal. He opened the envelope slowly, carefully, like it might bite. The first line read, "Probability of paternity, 0%. 0. He read it twice, then again. The child wasn't his. He let the paper fall to the floor. A strange calm overtook him. Not relief, not grief. Something beyond both. Like finding out the shipwreck you survived was never your ship to begin with. He stood, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face. The man in the mirror looked unfamiliar, sharper, quieter, not broken, not angry, just done. That evening, Mary called. He stared at the screen. Let it ring. She called again, and again. Finally, he answered. David, she breathed. Did you get the results? Yes. A long pause. I guess now you really have no reason to talk to me. He said nothing. I'm sorry, she whispered. He still didn't speak. I don't know what else to say. George left. My parents won't talk to me. This is the part, David said, his voice clear, where I'm supposed to feel sorry for you, where you think I'll rescue you one more time. No, she said quickly, that's not what I want. I wanted you to hear it from me, that I'm alone, and I deserve it. He leaned back in the chair. You said that same line when you lied about still loving me, so forgive me if it's lost its punch. Mary was quiet, then, can we talk, just once, face to face? No. I'm not asking for anything. Yes, you are, he said. You just don't know it yet. She exhaled, shaky. You were the only person who ever truly cared about me. I was also the only person you never chose, he replied. The line went silent, then disconnected. He turned the phone off. 3 days passed. Then one evening, there was a knock on his door. He knew it was her. He felt it in his chest like pressure before a storm. When he opened the door, Mary stood there soaked in rain, her coat clinging to her, eyes red-rimmed and glassy. In her hands was a box. I need you to take this, she said. David didn't move. It's everything you ever gave me, she added. Letters, gifts, notes, memories I don't deserve. He didn't reach for the box. She stood in the rain for a full minute before lowering it to the doorstep. I'll leave it here. Why now? He asked. She looked up. Because I need to let go. And because I want you to see that I know what I did. David glanced down at the box. You think guilt makes us even? No, she said softly. I think guilt is what I'll live with for the rest of my life. You're the thing I lost, that mattered. His eyes hardened. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. She flinched. I'm sorry, she whispered. Mary, he said, his voice now steady, you're going to be a mother, you don't have room to be sorry, you have to be strong. She nodded slowly. I'm trying. He looked at her one last time. Try somewhere else. Then he shut the door. He didn't cry. He didn't open the box. He left it outside, and in the morning, it was gone. Maybe Thelma took it, maybe Mary returned, he didn't ask. Instead, he focused on rebuilding. He started running each morning. He accepted a promotion at work. He joined a local photography club. He let the hurt move through him, not define him, and gradually, the echoes of her voice faded. But the final confrontation wasn't Mary, it was himself. 2 months later, David attended a community conference as a guest speaker, a leadership panel on resilience in corporate finance. Afterward, as he packed up his notes, a soft voice said, "Your story was incredible." He turned. A woman stood nearby, light brown curls, glasses, warm eyes. She looked familiar. "I'm Thelma's friend," she explained, offering a gentle smile. "We met briefly at her birthday." He smiled. "Right, I remember now. I'm Ava." They talked for 20 minutes. Then an hour. She had an honest laugh, a steady voice. She didn't try to fill silence. She didn't flinch when he mentioned he'd been married. She just said, "Then I imagine you've had to learn how to unlove someone." He nodded. "It's still a work in progress." "Isn't everything?" she replied. They parted with a handshake. 3 weeks later, they met for coffee, then dinner, then a bookstore walk. He never compared her to Mary, not once, because Ava didn't exist in Mary's shadow. She had her own light. And for the first time, David felt seen again, not as someone to fix, but someone worth knowing. Still, late at night, the weight of the past knocked now and then. Would Mary reach out again? She did. Another envelope, no return address. Inside was a photo. A newborn wrapped in a soft blanket, no message, no name, just a timestamp. David stared at it for a long time. The baby had her eyes. He didn't feel rage or sadness, just silence. He flipped the photo over. Written in tiny print. "Don't worry, he won't ever know your name, but I wanted you to see that I kept my promise. I'm trying to be strong." That neone. David sat beside Ava on a park bench, the same one Mary once cried on years ago. He handed her the photo. Ava studied it, then handed it back. "Does it change anything?" she asked. He shook his head. "No." She took his hand. Together, they watched the sunset turn the sky gold. He still had scars, but he wasn't bleeding anymore. 2 years later, David stood at the podium of the city's Innovation and Investment Conference, adjusting his suit cuff before speaking. The audience was full, cameras flashed, the room buzzed with reporters, venture capitalists, and young entrepreneurs, all waiting to hear from the man who had built the fastest-growing ethical fintech startup in the region. He cleared his throat. "When I started this company, I wasn't trying to prove anything, I was trying to rebuild." The room fell silent. "I'd come from a place most of you wouldn't guess, a marriage, a betrayal, a point in my life where everything felt like a dead end. But what I've learned is this: closure is not given, it's built, brick by brick, breath by breath." He paused, scanning the crowd. "And sometimes, the best revenge isn't fire, it's flourishing." Applause erupted. A standing ovation followed, but David wasn't listening for praise anymore. He was listening for peace, and he could finally hear it. Backstage, Ava waited, hands clasped, eyes proud. She had stood beside him through the late nights, the silent breakdowns, the rebirth. She never asked for more than truth, and she gave him more than he had ever dared to expect. As they walked out together into the golden evening light, David's phone buzzed, a message. Unknown number. "I saw your speech, he's walking now, he looks like you." He deleted it. Some echoes, no matter how tender, belonged to the past. The startup had been born in grief. David never denied that. He had taken all the money left from the marriage sale, the payout from dissolving shared assets, and turned it into something the world needed: financial services that rewarded integrity. The mission was clear: protect people from blind trust, because he knew what it was like to give it too easily. Mary never showed up again after that last envelope, but her shadow did. Once the media picked up his success story, she resurfaced, softly, not with demands, not with apologies, with appearances. A mutual friend posted a comment, "Isn't that Mary's ex?" Another uploaded a photo of her at a gallery opening, holding her child on her hip, the caption vague but deliberate, "Raising strength." She didn't contact him again, not directly, but David knew her silence now was less about guilt, and more about shame, and he preferred it that way. Because silence meant she finally understood that she was no longer the center of his gravity. David's company, Aurora Trust, had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. 1 year after launch, they were voted Most Ethical Startup of the Year. By year 2, they had offices in 5 cities, and now they were preparing to expand overseas. But more importantly, David had become a name, and one name always found its way into the orbit of another. George. One afternoon, during a panel in San Diego, David was approached by a man in a blazer too crisp to be comfortable. "Mr. Haynes," he said. "Pleasure. I'm from North Point Ventures. One of our senior partners expressed interest in a collaboration." David accepted the card, and when he flipped it over, he almost laughed. George Alden, partner, North Point Ventures. So that was the game. He waited until the next board meeting before addressing it. "We've received a partnership interest from North Point," David said. The room murmured. "They'll be attending our Q3 networking gala. Let's make sure we give them a warm welcome." He smiled, not kindly. The night of the gala, the ballroom shimmered with soft lighting and champagne. Aurora Trust banners lined the walls. The air was rich with ambition. George arrived late, wearing arrogance like cologne. David watched him from across the room. He saw the moment George noticed him, the moment he hesitated, then plastered on a smile and crossed the floor. "David," George said, extending a hand. David shook it, firm, measured. "George, didn't know you were the man behind Aurora Trust until recently," George said. "Impressive work." "I didn't know you were still in finance," David replied. George chuckled. "I bounced back." "I noticed," David said, raising his glass. "I know things ended rough between us," George added, "but I'm glad you landed well." David studied him. "Is that what you think this is? Landing?" George blinked. "Well, yes." David leaned in, voice low. "You stepped into a life that wasn't yours and watched it burn, then walked away like the ashes didn't smell. But I built something with the ruins. You want to be a part of it?" George smirked. "If it's business, I'm all ears." David smiled. "Good. Because I'd like you to pitch. To the board. Live." George's smirk faltered. David stepped back. "We'll see how you do with something that wasn't handed to you." The pitch day came. George stood before the board, polished and prepared. David didn't interrupt, he didn't undermine. He just watched. And when George finished, David rose. "Thank you, Mr. Alden, that was thorough, though some of our senior partners expressed concern over your firm's handling of the Verton scandal." George stiffened. David continued, "Aurora Trust's entire mission is built on transparency. We can't align with firms that manage deceit behind polished portfolios." The room agreed. The deal was denied. And George, who had once smiled from David's couch with Mary tucked under his arm, walked out of Aurora's doors, carrying nothing but silence. 2 weeks later, David received a letter in thick cream paper. From Mary. He considered tossing it, but opened it. Inside. "I heard what you did, I heard what you built, and I want to say this, not as the woman who failed you, but as the one who finally sees the man she lost. He's in school now, he wears in blue whenever he's asked to draw a family. I think part of him knows. But I've never told him your name, I've never told him what I did. He won't grow up in your shadow, I owe you that much." David folded the letter. No anger rose, no longing, just a quiet ending. Years passed. Ava became more than a partner, she became home. David proposed on the 5th anniversary of their bookstore walk. She said yes with a smile that didn't come from relief, but from recognition. Their wedding was small, intimate, no cameras, just laughter, sunlight, and the quiet promise of a life neither needed to escape from. At the reception, Thelma pulled him aside. "You did it," she said. He nodded. "I think I finally let go." "No," she said. "You didn't let go. You buried the past, built a city over it, and lit it up so bright they had to see it from miles away." He laughed. "Is that what you call closure?" Thelma smirked. "No, that's what I call revenge. But yours, it had class." 10 years after the divorce was finalized, David walked into his son's school, invited anonymously to judge a student startup fair. He didn't know which boy was hers, or his. But he saw a child with dark hair, sketching a business plan in blue crayon. He paused. The boy looked up, and smiled. David smiled back. Said nothing. Then walked on. Some stories don't end in fire, some end in quiet grace. And sometimes, the cleanest revenge is being unbothered, unreachable, and absolutely unforgettable.